As ever in the world of transfers, the clamour goes on. We're never satisfied, especially not when it's July the 1st. And there is still sort of scope for more deals. There's been a lot of talk about the PSR headroom Liverpool still have. We are, of course, expecting some outgoings. We'll touch on them in a moment. But the big one right now, and it centres around an outgoing in many ways as well, Jarell Quansah is pretty much on the brink of sealing his move to buy Leverkusen. We'll talk about that in more detail later. But that lends itself in many ways to a new centre-back, ultimately. But Marc Guehi is obviously the main topic of interest right now. Liverpool seemingly keen on the player. There seems to be somewhat of a split in valuation. Now, we saw last summer when it comes to Crystal Palace negotiating a potential exit for Marc Guehi. It's not straightforward, as Newcastle found out to their cost. Steve Parish is pretty firm in what he believes to be the right price. So, yeah, Liverpool, as I say, sweet on him, and there is a deal to be done somewhere.
Yeah. That's my understanding of the situation, is that there is interest. Of course, there is. He's a talented centre half. There's not too many of them around. Obviously, he's a full England international, a decent age, and I think coming up to 25. But I think so much depends, as you said, then on what do Palace want? What do they deem realistic, and is that in the kind of ballpark that Liverpool deem to be realistic? I was told that around the kind of £40 million mark would kind of be what around kind of the area that Liverpool would be looking at. I think if Palace were looking for more than that, then I'd be surprised if Liverpool pushed themselves. Bearing in mind he's only got a year left on his deal, and of course Palace are currently faced with the prospect of if they don't cash in, and it's unlikely he's going to sign a new contract, they could lose him for nothing. So. It's an intriguing one. I mean, Liverpool previously have been kind of looking at a younger profile of centre-back. There's no doubt about that. I think when you go back a couple of years, obviously there was the talk of Colwill when there was some uncertainty over whether he was going to be staying at Chelsea. A year ago, Lenny Yoro, but that became a kind of a no-go once it became clear he wanted guarantees about playing time. And then Dean Huijsen, obviously, who ends up going from Bournemouth to Real Madrid. That was another player that Liverpool were looking at. So it was kind of that younger profile, probably someone who you could bed in gradually, over the next 12 to 18 months. Of course, with someone like Guehi, the dynamic would be different because he would expect to come in and play. He'd want guarantees about that, especially with the World Cup on the horizon next summer. And then you throw into the mix, you've got the uncertainty over Konate's contract situation. So there's a lot of noise around that at the moment. The people I've spoken to at Liverpool still seem relatively relaxed, and that they pointed out that a lot of the speculation, Konate himself at the back end of the season was coming out and knocking down himself because it was frustrating him. Some of what he said were fake rumours that were out in the public domain. So from Liverpool's perspective, that process of trying to negotiate a renewal with Konate is still ongoing. But as we know in these situations, the longer the clock ticks on, the more of a concern it becomes in terms of potentially losing him for nothing.
Absolutely, especially when Real Madrid are involved, and we found that out to our cost. You mentioned it there, James, so I'll get a bit more on it if you don't mind. The seeming apparent desire to bring in a young centre-back and that profile of player. Marc Guehi as a like-for-like swap, obviously the age is different when it comes to Jarell Quansah. I think that's a really smart upgrade, and I really like Jarell Quansah, but still the fact remains. Do you think there is still that want from a Liverpool point of view to go and sort of find the next Virgil van Dijk, if that's even possible, or that younger profile of player to still come in and bolster the options in there?
Yeah, there is. I think if the Guehi ones happens, then I don't think we'd see them go and get another one. I think, but it's certainly not straight away, but it's certainly something that we know that succession planning. You look at what happened last summer with Mamadashvili. In many ways, even this summer with Kirkes, because obviously I'm sure we'll come on to talk about Andy Robertson. We're waiting to find out what he wants to do, but from Liverpool's perspective, it's about succession planning there. So yeah, they are going to have to prepare for that day when Virgil van Dijk is no longer around. Thankfully, because he signed that contract, and you look at the heights he reached last season. It doesn't look as if it's going to become a debate for another couple of years, but yeah, that's certainly in the back of the minds of the recruitment guys at Liverpool. The fact that that centre back department in the not too distant future is going to need a new leader.
Absolutely, it is, yeah. And that maybe will be Marc Guehi, just to finish on him, because obviously you mentioned the word leader there. Crystal Palace captain, led them to the FA Cup, led them to Europe, kind of. At the minute, we're not quite sure how that looks right now. Obviously, the multi-club ownership debate going on, circling around John Sextor. But with Marc Guehi, obviously, we spoke about the clubs and the valuations, and they might need to find a compromise somewhere. But I take it Liverpool are relatively confident that the player will be keen on the move.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing will be like that dynamic with the playing time, because as I said, in terms of with it being a World Cup year as well on the horizon, I think that is a big thing in terms of would he back himself to come in and get enough football. You'd like to think so. I mean, I think you'd like to think that in this day and age, but it's such a squad game now, and with so many games, and we know Konate, thankfully, his fitness record was a lot better last season, but that hasn't always been the case. So you'd also like to think that, okay, I don't think Liverpool would be able to guarantee to him, yes, you will start, 40, 50 games alongside Virgil van Dijk. But you'd also like to think just the lure of Liverpool, the chance to join the champions, to have Champions League football. You'd like to think that Guehi would back himself in that situation. If, and at the moment it's still quite a big if, the two clubs can agree a fee.